Move approval.
I'll support.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, passes unanimously. Okay, Alan Henry, remanufactured radiators. Okay,
Good morning.
we get the exciting stuff, right?
As always. Good morning. The next three action items, 3B, 3C, 3D, are all contracts for parts that fleet maintenance purchases on a regular basis. These have all come before the Finance Committee and the Board before. I believe that was in 2015. So it's time to award new contracts. And all of the three action items have been issued under the cover of an invitation for bid by the purchasing department in our usual places and usual manner. And I'll go through these one by one, answer any questions, and then just ask for recommendations for approval. The first one, 3B, remanufactured radiators. This is for the ability to send off carbon core radiators that we use in our 2001 through 2009 fleet. We received two bids. Duquesne Radiator, Austin & Son Duquesne Radiator is the incumbent and is recommended for award. That's the action item is to recommend approval for a one-year contract with two one-year renewals for an amount not to exceed $141,000 over the maximum three-year period, and also recommend approval to authorize the CEO to exercise the two one-year options.
Okay, questions, anyone? Yes.
Just one.
Mr. Schulman, I would be so disappointed.
I don't want to disappoint, for sure. What's the current contract? Dollar amount?
I believe it's generally roughly the same as our quantities did not change. So roughly it's about $57,000 per year. So as we bring on newer buses, they've actually switched to aluminum style radiators. So generally you don't remanufacture those. It's much cheaper to buy them outright.
Okay.
It's about the same because as we bring on new buses, the carbon core radiators that are rebuildable are generally being retired. So the quantities are reducing year to year.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
One quick question.
Yes, Mr. Eckers.
Just on the, and again, I was doing something else, so I wasn't really listening, so I apologize. So you might have said something about this, if you did, we talked about it, and I'll get the information later. Is this another opportunity where we can partner with Hart on purchasability, having better purchasing powers on stuff like this? I don't mean just this item, but things of this nature. Is this something we can start exploring a little bit?
That's a very good question, sir. Al Burns, Director of Procurement. We do look for contracting opportunities, and I'd like to say I'm glad to be on at PSTA as a full-time employee. First of all,
Welcome.
thank you. When I was doing the dual role, we were looking at contracting opportunities where bulk fluids and things, and where the contracts term are very close together. We might extend one, Hart might extend theirs, we might extend ours, where they could be coterminous. But we do look at those opportunities for economies of scale, as such as what you said. In this instance, since I came on board, Henry's maintenance group, some of the contracts reached their end of life, and we were extending them so we could kind of get all of his solicitations or all his contracts in line, where once again they would be coterminous. And Hart's procurement cycle didn't line up at the same time.
So is it really about when the contracts end, and or are there opportunities there? Forget that issue. Are there purchasing savings that we could probably realize if we went down that road?
Yes, sir, there definitely are.
Okay, great. Hopefully we continue to explore that aggressively.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else? I have a question. Carbon core radiators, are they usable in compressed gas vehicles, whether they run a little hotter and so they can't use them.
I would say some of
Piggyback
the,
off of
yes,
Commissioner Evans'
I would
question.
say some of the older models are, as I mentioned, a lot of today's newer buses are moving to aluminum style radiators that have electronic fan applications as opposed to the hydraulics that we have on our older vehicles.
Second question, what's the life expectancy on a radiator of this type?
Generally, we're getting about 8 to 9 years out of them, so just about the life of a bus, which is when, at that time period, fleet maintenance goes in and overhauls the bus to extend the useful life of the bus. So as part of that process, we replace the radiator, charge air cooler as well.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Approval.
Okay, good.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
And we'll put it on the regular agenda so they can all talk about radiators too.
Right, that's a good questioning item, yeah. People like those kinds of things.
Hopefully not, hopefully not.
Okay.
Next action item before you is item 3C, which is for the cleaning of DOC and DPF filters. So first of all, let me explain what those abbreviations mean. DOC stands for diesel oxidation catalysts, and DPF stands for diesel particulate filters. And these specialized filters started appearing when the emission laws of 2008 were adopted in heavy-duty diesel vehicles. And that happened in 2008. We have them all the way up to our current vehicles today, and will continue to be part of vehicles into the future. And what these do are they capture particulate matter and exhaust gas emissions in order to be in compliance with today's stringent emission standards for diesel vehicles. As an ongoing preventative maintenance program, these filters need to be taken off the bus and cleaned, which is a pretty extensive process, tested to make sure that they continue to do the job that they're required to do. We received 2 bids. In this case, Southeast Power Systems of Tampa was the lowest bidder, as you can see. They were deemed non-responsive because in our technical specifications, we asked that pricing be received for being able to repair what we call the sensor bungs, which is on each of these filters there is a sensor that essentially has a port that you screw into. Sometimes these sensors or these sensor bungs break off because these sensors stay on there for a very long time, and these filters get very hot. And rather than just throw away the filter, which can cost in excess of $2,000, there is the ability to repair it and keep it. Southeast Power Systems did not quote that and was not interested in doing that repair. Austin & Son Auto Electric was compliant with all of our technical specifications in addition to being able to make those repairs. They are also the incumbent, and the recommendation is to approve a 1-year contract with 2 one-year renewals with Austin & Son for an amount not to exceed $282,000 over the maximum 3-year period, and also recommend approval to authorize the CEO to exercise the 2 one-year options.
Okay, thank you. Questions, anyone? Commissioner Schulman?
How often do those sensor ports break off? Do you have an idea about how many times per year?
Generally, the filters are pulled off once per year during what we consider an annual. I would say that on average, 2 or 3 out of the yearly. We generally send off about 150, so it's a very small amount, but it is something where being able to repair it rather than just throw away the filter, which could still be usable and cleaned, is approximately $2,000. So if it's about 2 or 3 a year, it could be $6,000 saved as opposed to buying a brand new one.
Okay, and this contract amount is over the 3 years, so it's $90,000, $100,000 per year.
About on average, about $93,000.
Is a little bit more savings than.
That's what I was
10,000.
getting at, is if we're throwing away, $6,000 a
Right.
year, if we had to replace the filters versus versus
Right, so-
upfronting, $10,000 over 3 years, just trying to get through the math, so.
Right,
okay.
so for the additional $10,000 over the lowest, what we can salvage will definitely make up and recoup that.
It's also ecologically.
I understand.
Any other questions?
Yes, Joe, whereabouts is the Austin and Son Auto Electric, where is that company at?
They are local to Pinellas County.
We're local?
Okay, anybody else? Yes, Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How long, they're the current contractor, Austin, how long have they been the contractor for PSTA?
3 years, this would be for another 3 years.
And you're happy with the service, they're doing a good job?
Yes, we are, they do an excellent job.
Okay, good. Everybody stole all my questions? All right. Do I hear a motion?
I move that the bid be approved for Austin and Son.
A second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, passes unanimously, thank you very much. Okay.
Consent?
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Consent?
Not unless the board wants to hear about these in particular.
Please.
I would think they're not terribly interested. in that.
I don't know, the sensor one was kind of interesting.
Okay, batteries.
All right, action
We're going for the trifecta here. Batteries.
A lot of conversation on this one.
Action item 3D is for a contract to purchase commercial 12-volt batteries. These are, as I mentioned, 12-volt batteries on the low voltage side of the bus. These are not hybrid batteries. Typically, we purchase approximately 450 batteries per year. The average life expectancy of a 12-volt battery on our fleet is approximately 1 year. We received 5 bids, and the lowest bidder that was able to meet our technical specifications for the batteries that our vehicles require was a company called Future Plus of Florida. This is a brand new vendor to PSTA. There are no incumbents that bid upon this particular IFB. So the recommendation is to approve a 1-year contract with 1-year option, year renewal, with Future Plus for an amount not to exceed $117,000 over the maximum 2-year period, and then to recommend approval to authorize the CEO to exercise the 1-year option.
Yes, Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we don't currently have a contract for batteries? Where are we
We
good?
do, it is coming up, it is coming up as expiring,
Okay.
so in order to keep us with the ability to purchase batteries, we issued this IFB.
And who's the existing?
The existing was batteries by Fisher.
And they decided not to
You want to bid?
That they decided not to bid.
bid. I'm surprised Interstate didn't bid. Any concerns with moving to, I guess we have to move to a new vendor if the existing one didn't bid, but any concerns?
No, actually, pretty much all 4 out of the 5 vendors bid the basis of design battery, which was DECA, which was the original equipment battery that was supplied with the bus when it was purchased and still is to this day. So no, with DECA, it's a quality battery.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Ayers?
So this question is one that obviously I don't have any idea what's underneath the hood of the bus. So, this is 201 for 201 buses. So these batteries are used in our electric, or excuse me, in our hybrid buses and our diesel buses.
Yes.
And that's the only batteries those 2 buses utilize.
So, for these batteries, which are 12 volt, we call it the low voltage. So these batteries, which all of our buses have, each of them has 2. These batteries supply power to start the engine on both hybrids and, I'm sorry, not hybrids, but on diesels, but also power the lighting, the headlights, the tail lights, the interior lighting, the radio system, the technology. So that's what these batteries do.
For both buses.
Both buses.
But not the propulsion of the bus going down the road.
Correct. On the hybrid buses, the propulsion of the bus down the road is from the high voltage batteries, which are on top of the roof.
Okay. And the batteries that are used in the electric buses, different completely?
Good question. So the electric buses also have 12-volt batteries, again, to power low voltage circuits, headlights, technologies such as that. But their propulsion is entirely supplied by the high voltage batteries on top of the bus.
And the disposal of all of these batteries, the diesel batteries are the ones that do all the lighting and everything, and the other batteries, the high voltage, is similar? I mean, the disposals and the disposal problems for all of those batteries are similar?
As a requirement of all of our battery contracts, we make sure that, number one, the supplier is compliant with environmental protection standards for disposal of batteries, recycling of those batteries, and also transport of those batteries to be recycled under.
And you have that information, what they have to go through each of those kind of batteries? Okay. Could you send that to me? I appreciate it. Thank you.
Anybody else? My question is a little bit similar to Commissioner Scott. I assume all these vendors, including the one we're talking about here, Future Plus, have been checked out to be financially sound, have a good track record as far as customer service, they're not going to run out of what we need, that kind of thing.
I'd like to field that question.
Okay, thank you.
Before we award any contract, there are certain requirements that we go through that's best practice in public procurement. We check EPLS, we do a vendor questionnaire that goes out to, not only even if it were the incumbent, we send it out to some of their references. Before bringing any contract or a PO award to the board or committee, we go through all those steps.
Okay,
So the short answer is yes, they are financially stable, and they are not on the debarred or suspended list.
right, because there's a very wide range in pricing, and so they're really at the low end. So I just want to make sure they didn't underbid themselves or that kind of thing.
Yes, sir. And we have measures to make sure that Henry's group, make sure that the price is fair and reasonable.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you very much, fellas. Great job on these. Do I hear a motion on the battery purchase?
So moved. I'll support.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. And so again, to anticipate Commissioner Egger's question, yes, that'll go on the consent agenda. Okay. Diane, you're going to talk to us about bus repairs. I was also interested to find out, and maybe James can give us an update on our drivers with these last two accidents. But you're going to just talk about the bus repair process.
This is an action item for bus repairs from an accident, to approve a one-time contract with Coach Crafters not to exceed an amount of $302,500. The invitation for bid went out for a contractor to provide transportation materials and labor necessary to repair bus 15104 that did sustain substantial damage as a result of a rear-end collision. On February 6, 2018, a fully loaded dump truck rear-ended our bus when it was stopped at a bus stop. We did have a little bit of an update since this occurred. We have received full payment from the at-fault party. In fact, we received full payment plus loss of use. So we've actually received a payment of $312,404.78. So we have the money in the bank to pay for the repair and the loss of use while it's being repaired. So we're asking for approval to award the contract to Coach Crafters to go forward with the repair.
Questions?
Yeah.
So everybody's got a question. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Mr. Scott.
Thank you, sir. So what is bus 15?
It's a hybrid,
And what year is that?
2015. So it has useful life, substantial useful life left.
Yeah, it's almost 50% of the cost of the vehicle.
It was very close.
I think we're lucky in the fact that, well, a couple of things. One, that the bus is I think it's a testament to the Gilly product that it can even be repaired. Number two, we're very, very lucky that, unlucky that we got hit, but lucky that it was somebody that had the insurance enough to cover that kind of repair, because how much of this is actually hybrid parts? Because I gotta believe I actually saw that bus, and it took a pretty good shot.
Oh, it's like a heavy.
But I mean, what are we replacing, the hybrid drive in this, or what's the?
I'll have to defer to Henry on that.
So this impact was incurred on the right rear of the bus, actually from the center rear to the right rear, which does house a lot of those hybrid components. The impact was so great that the engine, the crankshaft, was actually bent and pushed into the drive unit. In return, the high voltage cabling, which transmits the electricity to those components, were stretched and compromised, and also the impact compromised the entire rear HVAC system, in addition to sending a rippling at least through the upper deck where the stanchion poles were removed from the ceiling structure. So it's just one of those situations where wrong place on the bus to take an impact in terms of where components are located.
Well, from that point of view, how confident are you? And I know Coachcrafters very well, and they're very, very capable people. But when something takes that big of a shot, are we just going to be dealing with problems, from now till the end of time on this thing? Or
We've sent buses to Coachcrafters before that. Some of our legacy buses, 2007, have received front impact collisions where the entire front tub assembly had to be replaced. And they do exceptional work out there. We've never had quality concerns after the repair come up. And for very complex repairs such as this, we will actually go out there, the maintenance staff, and check in periodically as to how the progress is coming.
have we had an impact this significant with a hybrid bus before?
Not to my recent recollection. Most of our rear impacts are incurred on the left rear of the bus, so different side.
Commissioner Bennett?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Commissioner Eggers?
Well, most of my, that's why I always defer to the bus guy when
Okay.
it comes to questions like this. So I guess the only other question I'd ask would be, is there, when does it become smart money to either buy a new hybrid bus or a new diesel bus instead of spending money on I mean, I know this has got useful life, but still we're talking about a big ticket here. This is huge. So just a curiosity question.
And what would the, if we decided to buy something new and just keep that as parts, what would the parts value of that vehicle be?
I would say not that very much, since most of the parts that we would salvage have been.
Yeah.
What about the batteries? Does that have to be replaced in this too?
They'll be inspected. We did not determine that they would need to be replaced. I think for this situation, this accident was not our fault. The responsible party has sent us the check to pay and cover for these damages. So it's not that PSTA is paying for this repair.
Right.
As big as it is being reimbursed, so to speak, by the responsible party.
The problem always is when, since all of our buses are purchased with federal grant funds.
Right.
So the federal government really owns the bus.
Right.
They require, if you total your bus, even if you get paid, even if it's not your fault, then you have to pay the federal government back for the depreciated value unused life.
Value.
And that is when it costs PSTA money, because then they take it out, they don't write a check to the federal government, they take it out of a future grant, basically.
You stole my question.
So we can't, we couldn't really,
We can't get.
Go buy
Right.
something else.
go buy something else, yeah.
Okay, the other question is with regard to that, Henry, what's sort of the break point when we do internal repairs and when we send them out for, an outside vendor to do this kind of work?
Even though we have a very capable group of people in our body shop, it boils down to complexity of the repair. When we get into situations where there might be subframe issues, we don't have the ability to change out front tub assemblies that are hot riveted. It kind of exceeds what our capability is. And then, of course, we have to balance that with availability of what we're currently doing. Coach ground, in this case, this was a very complex type of repair, and it's just best to be handled by outsourced folks.
Second question, we've been out of service with this piece of property for around 6 months. How long is it going to take to get it back in service? So if we had it towed over there today.
Best case scenario, 7 to 9 months.
Okay, so it's going to be out of service over a year. Okay, and Diane, you said that we got reimbursed for that
Right. The
kind
loss,
of number?
right, the loss of use amount that we received was $9,943.05. We cannot collect for the time when we're negotiating.
Mhm.
We can only collect for the time that it says the bus will be out of service for repairs, and that's subject to case law. So we use that amount of time when we're negotiating loss of use.
Okay.
And we generally, we look at several different ways when we're calculating the loss of use. We look at the individual route to determine what the revenue is for that route. We've looked at a blended rate before. We kind of looked at different rates to determine which one is most beneficial when we're negotiating.
Okay.
And just a couple other things. The bid does include a 1-year warranty after the work is completed. And as far as the conversation of totaling versus repairing, if we didn't, if there had been a $1,000 policy, that would certainly be a conversation we would have to, and a decision we would have to make. But then we were fortunate they had a $500,000 property damage limit.
Great. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, any other questions?
They have knowledge.
Do I hear a motion? Move approval?
So did we hear the second half? Your other question?
Oh, the second half, pardon me?
How is the employee doing?
Oh,
Did you ask that?
Oh, no, well, we will, I'm going to ask that
After
to
we-
James. So that's not tied in with this bid.
Okay,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. We had a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry,
Okay,
we
thank
didn't
you
hear
very
a
much.
second. We
Pardon
didn't
me?
hear the second. Who seconded the motion?
Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Diana. Good job on negotiating that. Thank you. Okay. Government affairs contract.
Okay, I'll take this. We just,
Thank you, Henry.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
thank you guys. We just added this to your agenda yesterday. And we found out that we needed to take this to the PSTA board. But like we did last month with our federal government affairs contract, so too our state government affairs contract is coming up for renewal. Actually, not renewal, just to get approval to extend the option years on the existing contract. So the board approved a 2-year contract back in 2016 with RSA Consulting, and with an option for 3 additional years. And so this action item would authorize a 1-year extension plus authorize the CEO to exercise the other 2 options, the second year for a total of 5 years. The fee per month, as you can see, it has been $7,500 a month for the first 2 years, and they're proposing to keep that for this next year, and then go up by $500 a month for the last 2 years, if we choose to go with them.
Okay, questions? Yes, Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brad, any reason any concerns of moving forward with RSA? Any reason we wouldn't want to do it?
No, I think they've done a really good job. So RSA is, you know them as Ron Pierce and Natalie King, and then they have a sub-consultant, Alan Susky, is on their team. That's the total team, and they've done a really good job, I think. We completely redid our procurement for our lobbyists 2 years ago and put in a whole bunch of reporting requirements that we didn't have before. So that they've done a really good job of consistently keeping us informed of what they're doing. Because oftentimes, in the back rooms of Tallahassee, you have no idea what really goes on, and they've really done a good job of, I think, improving the communications back and forth. And I would have taken this to the legislative committee, which understandably has a lot more experience with them, but the amount, as you can see, per year is under $100,000. So we were just going to do the 1 year, and Alan said, our legal counsel said I'm not sure why, had to take this to the PSTA board.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Schul.
So we've had a 2-year contract thus far and the price was $7,500 per month?
Yeah.
So we're keeping the 3rd year at $7,500, then going to then going to $8,500?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll say initially I was a little concerned that we had 6% increases in years 4 and 5 in the cost, but over the life of that 5-year period, it's only 2.5%. So I think that's fair.
Anyone else?
Just want to go on the record for going through that.
Anyone else? Questions? Is this the kind? I mean, I've met these folks when we went to Tallahassee, so I'm familiar with them. But is this the kind of contract that's biddable, or is it really necessary that we sort of keep continuity in our lobbying force so that we have, like the same clout, and we don't lose anything in terms of the ability to get the services that we need to make sure the PSTA is protected and moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure every lobbying firm that you have would argue what you just said. There's no possible way you can ever switch.
Yeah.
Which,
But we did.
every vendor says that right now.
Yes, sir.
So we didn't have lobbyists.
Didn't we have a state lobbyist that we switched?
Yeah.
Oh, we did. Okay, I thought we didn't have lobbyists.
PSA previously had a 4 or 5 year contract with Gray Robinson, and then made the switch in 2016, and put in all these provisions to provide ongoing communications, improved communications, and that's really worked. Yeah. 5 years. Plus, I think it is sort of a good thing to put these into option years. It kind of keeps them honest. It keeps them communicating with us.
Very good.
So I think 5 years is a good balance.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll support.
Okay. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Right, opposed? Okay. Passes unanimously.
Alice had theirs for like.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Consent or action?
Oh, we better put that one on action.
Yeah, that's action.
Because if we don't, I'm sure that'll be
Yeah,
pulled.
Breaking
yeah, it'll
your
be pulled
streak.
anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Good point, that'll get pulled for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Health benefits.
She'll want to talk about it.
They laughed at me.
Debbie.
I
I love her. No, I just had 8 hours of her yesterday. Did she meet? Yeah.
Morning.
Good morning.
I've got Sean Fleming from the Garing Group, who I've asked to come to the table in case there's any technical questions as we go through this. They are our broker as it relates to health insurance and our consultants as well. Today we're going to be talking about the employee health benefits, the new concepts that we brought to this fiscal year and how they're performing, as well as the health insurance renewal for next year, which is the action item for you today. If you recall, last year when I stood up here, we were looking at a 90% increase in the cost of claims over the past 2 years. That really made us take a look as to what do we need to do differently. So for the first time in the history of PSTA, we offered options to our employees. We offered 3 different options: a buy-up plan, which is basically staying the same to the previous fiscal year. That was the most expensive option. A new base plan where we increase the deductible a bit, as well as slight increases in the co-pays. We also found that our employees loved going to the emergency room for everything. So we increased the co-pay up to $300 in that plan to discourage that, so that they would go to their doctor, a clinic, emergency room, anything but the emergency room. And the most different option that we put up there was the high deductible plan. So with a high deductible plan, we made the incentive free for singles, which the majority of our employees are in the single category regardless of which plan they are looking at. And we further incentivize them in the high deductible plan by putting anywhere from $200 to $400 in a health savings account. For us here at PSTA, it's very important to stay competitive in the marketplace. As I'm sure you've heard us talk about when we talk about overtime and costs, we have between 4 to 5 operators retire or leave every single month. So it's important for us to be competitive, and a lot of our employees come to PSTA for health insurance benefits. And when we were taking and educating our staff on all these new options, we wanted to let everybody know, we kept drilling in, 90% of our employees never met the $750 of the deductible under the buy-up plan. 85% never paid anything out of the deductible. So we wanted to put out there that there's less risk than you might think in trying something new with a high deductible plan. And these were the costs that were on here. And I think this became affectionately known, the new base plan is the $29 a month plan. Or not a month, but for pay period. And then the high deductible we put out there, it is free for the majority of the people who went into it. How did it work out? You know I experiment, and you know I come back and say it worked, it didn't work. This is one of those experiments where we came out with the 3 plans, and it has worked extremely well. We have found that our cost per employee has decreased significantly. At the bottom here, last year we had 1 plan, or the year before in fiscal 17, 1 plan. The average cost per claim was $974. We now have the 3 plans. The average cost has been reduced down over here to $873, and what we call our loss ratio has significantly decreased. And that loss ratio is how much are we paying out in claims compared to what we set aside to pay for them. As you can see on here, for starting with the first column, numeric column, this is our buy-up plan. So we had people who, for whatever reason, whether change was a little too much for them or their own personal health issues, decided to stay in that plan. That is our most expensive plan at $1,800 per claim. Our new base plan is at $741, and the high deductible at $65 per claim. Now, I thought, and I think we all thought when we introduced the high deductible plan, we were going to have all those healthy young millennials going in there, and it's not. The average age in that plan is 49.3 years, which shocked me, absolutely shocked me. The other thing that I found was interesting is 87% of the employees in this plan come from maintenance and transportation. So that was interesting to me. I thought maybe more from the admin side, because it was a little different concept, that it may be more likely to try it. And how these plans have performed this year is important to how we look at this coming year. So for this coming year, on the average in the United States, the average increase has been 7% to health insurance costs. In the state of Florida, 10%. We're coming in slightly under that at 9.7%, and there will be no increase to the high deductible plan. So all the costs that we had, and I put back up here 18. So everything that's in the 18 plan for the high deductible will be the same for fiscal year 19. The new base plan is going up from $29 to $31.32. I'm not sure what I'll call that plan, if it was a $29 plan before. And then the buy-up plan going to $76.04. So how we've performed last year has affected what we're doing this year. And I think these are very competitive within the marketplace. We did speak with the union last week and went over this. Nobody ran screaming from the room, so that was good. As a matter of fact, we have 21 sessions, educational sessions, set up in the coming weeks. And between the union, SEIU union, and transportation, we are going to make the sessions mandatory for them, so that no one has an excuse to say, I didn't know my options. The other thing is, throughout the year, it's not just education one time a year. We've spent a lot of time talking about, did you know we've done campaigns? Did you know all your annual physicals, regardless of which plan you're in, are free? Did you know there's many ways to get your prescriptions at lower costs? So we've done education and campaigns on that. We've done lunch and learns on such topics as how to eat healthy on a budget, exercising. We did a smoothie thing over in the driver's lounge. I can't remember all of them, but we've done quite a bit throughout the year. So education certainly is very, very important. And the other thing is what we've done with the classes this year and what we want to look to going forward is behavior modification. That is where we're going to get the long-term positive effects of what we are doing. One idea that we are looking at is to purchase through a Fitbit program, like a $50 Fitbit, and if somebody wants something fancier, they could do something more, and incentivize the employees. Because this is a new concept, should we move forward with it, we wanted to start with a high deductible plan. So for instance, if we say if you walk 10,000 steps a day, for that day you may get, for instance, $3 into your health savings account. So we're looking at incentivizing people to put more into their health savings account while changing behaviors.
Question.
Yes, sir.
On that front, have you thought about that one? I'll be interested to see how many people jump on that one. And I think we talked about it last year. The county has a kind of the opposite incentive. And I just wondered how those typically work, where they say, if you don't go to the doctor, it'll I think there's a pretty significant, it's about a $500 cost to the employee if they don't get to a doctor for the year, just to check in. So we're trying to do a lot of preventative stuff, make sure people go and not, for some reason, decide, well, we don't need to. So I don't know, do those things typically work? And
So I think, what I would say is, one, it depends on your employee population. So every kind of entity is a little bit different. From a let me just hit the financial point. From a financial point, it tends to kind of be the same thing, because what entities do is they add that onto the rate and then take it off, so it's kind of neutral. So either way, incentive or disincentive, it kind of costs the entity the same thing financially. I think if you look at kind of studies as a whole.
In the given year you're talking about.
In the given year,
I was thinking more long-term.
In the long term, I think whether or not, people engage more for an incentive versus a disincentive, we've historically seen that the perception that there's an incentive there is more effective than maybe that disincentive. But we've also seen groups do both. So as an example, there might be a wellness incentive, but then a disincentive around something else, meaning you need to have a health assessment to get into the plan. So they do a little bit of that.
Really, I was surprised. I'm surprised that the disincentive doesn't work better. I mean, that's
Well,
a big disincentive.
You may
for
get
me.
more people to do it,
Yeah.
but from an overall perception and morale of the employees, how is that perceived
mad as
and
they hate
taken
you.
away?
They're mad as hell because we made them go to the doctor.
Yeah, I think you probably get more engagement
They're still
quicker
free.
with a disincentive, depending on how strict that is. But which one actually drives
Okay.
change
just
better
curious.
over the long term, I think is maybe the incentive route.
Okay, thank you.
Since we broke for questions. Quick question on the incentive on this particular portion. So, and I'm looking at it from the finance side, not from the health of our employee side, so put that caveat in there. Wouldn't it make more sense for us to have incentives for healthier action in the new base plan or the buyout plan, where we bear a larger amount of the cost of healthcare versus in the high deductible plan?
I think, we're not saying this is the only incentive. And it's
Okay.
like this year, we gave an incentive for doing, what's it called, your healthcare, what's it called, healthcare assessment when you go
Survey, like
online to
healthcare
do
survey.
it. We've had incentives for, whether it's walking with the buddy, going to the gym, doing different things within all the plans. What we talked about is if this is successful with the high deductible plan, in future years, what we can do is perhaps for the other plans, do a holiday, if you will, from not paying the premium in the month of December for either one or two of the pay periods. Because we don't want to just give incentives to one group and nothing to anyone else.
Well, and from a finance committee perspective, I'd like to make sure that the incentives we're giving will impact our fiscal
Yeah.
results in the best way possible.
Right,
And that's
and-
in the high deductible health plan, that's not necessarily the case, because the burden's been shifted.
We should give the Fitbits to the $1,800 people, right?
Yeah.
Or
I
Apple
think-
smartwatches,
Yeah.
whatever,
Well,
position to walk with.
Yeah, and ultimately what we want to do is if you look at a lot of these costs, there's some costs that we can't get after. If somebody gets diagnosed with cancer, there's not a lot we can do. But looking at things like hypertension, high cholesterol, all these things, what can we do to drive that change? I think the other thing we take in consideration, though, in the short term, because long term everything is rolling out a new program like this, making sure it's something that we can administer that's financially sustainable. So does it make sense to start small and at least get some of the kinks out and have the program working? But I think it's definitely something as we look at it that we want to bring back, a solution that potentially goes after all parties. The only thing I'll say to that is, we're obviously seeing good results in the high deductible plan, not just because those people are healthier, but because that plan drives better decision making, looking at costs. So a little bit of added incentive for people to at least consider that plan, we're not forcing them into it, I think may go a long way, because if all of a sudden somebody can get another $500 a year in that HSA, that plan becomes much more attractive. So that will also impact those claims over the long term.
The concern for me, and it's just how I'm reading the employees in the plan numbers, is having a significant number of people in the new base plan is leading me to believe, so the employee is the best judge of their health and prospective health looking forward. They know who they are and how they feel, what their family history is. And so having a significant number of people in that base plan in the middle, to me, is saying, the employees are saying, we're concerned that we have underlying health issues that may need to be addressed. We don't want to bear the burden of that cost in the high deductible health plan. Therefore, the more we can do to incentivize better health care in that middle group, we can lead to better results for both parties.
And again, this is just one of many. Like I said, this year we did quite a bit. But to your point on the fiscal side of things, the action item that's before you today is for the renewal of the health insurance plans for the major medical with the prescription, your vision, your dental, and the life insurance. It's coming up at $7.6 million of our costs. That is within our proposed budget of about $7.8 million, slightly over $7.8 million. So it leaves room for incentives. It also leaves room where Michael and I might be able to take a little bit of the savings to reduce the deficit for next year. But to your point, we've got room to do quite a bit here and still save some money, which Brad will make us smile as we work on our deficit for next year. So that is the action item, is for the health insurance renewals today with Cigna for the major medical, prescription, and dental, Advanica for the vision, and Minnesota Life for the life insurance.
Okay, other questions? Commissioner Schultz?
So the loss ratio dropped in half almost, from 123%
Right.
to 66%.
For the end of March, yes.
But the overall insurance costs are going up 9.7%. Can we break down why that is, if we're experiencing a better loss ratio?
Yeah, so.
Why insurance is going up?
So I think a couple things, and I'll just see if I have a little bit of data here.
Never goes
So
down.
if you look at that, the first thing I would say is that's based on current enrollment. So when you look at some of those plans, you have a loss ratio still of over 100% in the buy-up plan.
Mhm.
I'm looking at, it's not on Debbie's, but if you break that out, you've got over 100% loss ratio in the buy-up plan. You have closer to 80% in the base plan, and then you have 8.6% in the high deductible plan. So as you look at that, so what an insurance carrier is going to do is they're going to say based on current enrollment, based on where everybody is now, so the increases are higher in those plans where those costs are being higher. So that 9.7 that we talked about, that is largely coming from plans that have a loss ratio of 100% and over 80%. If, as an example, if everybody shifted down to the high deductible plan next year, that increase ultimately would kind of pan out being zero because those rates aren't going up at that level in the high deductible plan. But when you look at it, so they're looking and saying, if everybody stays where they are, what do we need to continue to cover those costs in the future of that? The other thing I would say is, if you remember last year, the initial increase really where things should have been was about 55%. Cigna made a pretty significant investment in that renewal. So they're still looking at being a little bit behind the curve with that overall loss ratio. We've had a lot of discussions because of that about the potential of self-funding, and does it make more sense to take that risk as the entity? I know a number of the entities that you all are with are self-funded on that. We really like to give it probably one more year to just see how having a full year of data on that high deductible plan to really make an educated decision on whether or not that makes sense.
Okay. We also, do we have a breakdown on the increases for the dental, vision?
Yeah, those did not go up at all.
Okay, so the 9.7% is
It's just-
pure healthcare.
Yeah, I mean, right.
Okay.
Yeah, the other one stayed the same.
Any other questions? I'm sure you have, but just to piggyback off Commissioner Schulman's questions, have we looked at ways we could sort of sweeten the pot to shift some of the people from the plan where there are losses to those where we're doing okay?
Debbie, do you have that? It was on one of Debbie's slides, but I think we got, so if you actually look at Debbie's second bullet there, so the first thing is the high deductible plan, we're not increasing the employee's contribution into that plan. Anybody that's in that plan, they're actually going to see no increase, which we think is good for around the water cooler talk too, because if somebody says, oh, my insurance went up, oh really, mine didn't, and they can have that discussion. But the increase on the buy-up plan to the employee contribution is actually going to be 14% over what they're paying now. It's only 8% on the base plan. So we built in some steerage in there for employees to really take, as Debbie said, a little bit harder look this year. And one of the things we want to do in those education sessions is really say, hey, how much did you spend last year? How many times did you go to the ER? How many times did you have to pay your deductible? To see if it makes sense to pay that extra money, or would you be better off to put that money in your health savings account? And that's kind of what we're trying to get at with that. Because, to the commissioner's point, there are people that know their health and they buy that plan because they need it. But I'll tell you, if you look at statistically, there's probably, of all those people in that plan, half of them are probably buying it out of fear, not because they're using it. So they see the higher deductible and it looks scary, but the reality is they didn't even have a deductible event all year. So this should give those people a little bit of extra thought process as to whether or not that's the right plan for
The problem with that is the fear is partly due to their own view of their future health, not necessarily current health, but Dad's got diabetes, so I'm concerned that I might have that at one point, or so there's a sense of that before the event actually takes place. Do we have the ability to contract with? And sorry, I preempted your question. Do we have the opportunity to contract with like urgent care clinics to say for like the high deductible health plan have employees use those services without paying anything? As a further incentive to get more folks over there for smaller medical items?
So on the high deductible plan, anything that's not preventative has to go towards the deductible. That's in order for that plan to be qualified to be with the HSA. But what we have been talking about and looking at is, we have a number of entities around that have on-site clinics where they actually bring in and contract, a full clinic. And we've looked at that. PSTA is a little bit small to go kind of full bore and do that on their own. But what's become a little bit more popular now that we want to look at, we've talked with the unions about it, in our last couple of meetings and throughout the year, is there some hybrid of that you potentially bring a nurse practitioner on site, even if it's 20 hours a week. What some of these entities are doing now with that is they actually bring in the telemedicine kiosks, so they have a doctor on standby if it's something beyond the nurse practitioner's realm, and look at, can we do that to help, reduce some of those ER visits, reduce trips to the urgent care. Cigna actually has a model where they can do that, as well as independent other companies. So that's something that for the next year we're going to be looking at. Is there something potentially that makes financial sense to bring somebody on site or near site, and say, hey, PSTA employees, you can go here at no cost, get people back to work quicker, keep them out of the ER, keep them out of the hospital.
So,
Yeah, good.
So, is there, instead of being able to provide that service, does it make more sense to add more money to the health savings account contribution from PSTA? So, my goal is to get more people to the high deductible health plan that really should be there. Maybe they're a little too fearful, and incentives are great because it also changes behavior, which ultimately makes everyone's lives better. But it takes a while to change behavior.
Yeah, so you certainly have to just throwing more money into that account. Where our discussion was with more of the incentive is what I think a lot of employers are doing is they're trying to get away from, the employees not having any skin in the game, for lack of a better term. So we're just going to give you this because we're giving it. Instead say, hey, you can earn this, but here's what we're asking for in return. And I think that's more a little bit where we're leaning is trying to do what you're saying, but still making them have some level of engagement and not just providing it for the sake of providing it.
So the flip side to that, though, is the comment you made earlier that if we moved all these folks to the high deductible health plan, and our loss ratios drop significantly, then our increases in premiums next year would be, you said could be flat, but we'll assume that it's going to be something, but it would be less than what we're currently experiencing. So we have a net savings that way, even though they don't necessarily have skin in the game. So based on the employee population, my concern is that more people aren't moving to the high deductible health plan because they can't afford the skin in the game, and so forth. They stayed away. The other concern I have, and I don't know if we know this yet, is of the folks that are now actually in the high deductible health plan, are they still seeking the care that they should be to maintain good health, or are they delaying care, thereby pushing greater costs down the road? And we probably won't know that fully, and with HIPAA we don't know what they should or shouldn't be doing, but that's the other concern.
I'll just say that some of the initial metrics we've looked at, and we don't have a year's worth of data, and without a year with a smaller percentage of the population in there, it's not that statistically valid, but we haven't seen any strong indication. First of all, preventative care is free in that plan, and we've seen the preventative care metrics still look good, what we've seen in that plan. So overall, we haven't seen any indication that people aren't getting care in that. And we also looked at salary ranges across all the plans, and we actually, it appears that it doesn't, from the people that took it, we don't believe there's a huge financial barrier. So we've actually seen some of the lower paid people taking the most expensive plans because they're worried about potentially the deductible. But I think when you look at that, if you just went to one plan, you know, is the loss ratio going to drop necessarily? Potentially. The one thing I would say is you have a group of individuals, as every entity does, that they're going to have high cost claims every year. And the reality is, whether it's a $750 deductible or $1,500 or a couple thousand, if I have 100,000 in claims for the year, it doesn't really matter whether the plan offset 1,000, you know, whether I offset 1,000 or 2,000, because the reality is that big hit, those individuals are still going to be on the plan. So you won't necessarily see this rapid drop if you blended all the population together to one. So this at least gives people a start towards better decision making. And I think as you look at, had an entity as an example, they put their high deductible plan in. The first year, 7 people took it. They had about 400 employees. By year 4, all the employees had migrated over to the high deductible, and they had just taken it. So I think as we look at kind of approach, I think what we're looking at is how can we follow a similar track. You know, you do have union contracts, you have all that. We don't want to push necessarily too hard, but keep incentivizing it. With the way those loss ratios are, you know, we could be here 4 years later saying the high deductible plan, the payroll contributions haven't increased. And as the other ones increase, people will keep having more and more incentive to choose that.
One final question, I think. So as another incentive, we looked at cost sharing with a catastrophic coverage. So like a cancer coverage, you know, an indemnity for, you know, a heart attack or something like that to assuage some of the fears that people might have of large medical bills if they went to the high deductible health plan.
So you're talking more like a supplemental plan that would offset those expenses.
Like for specific illnesses or concerns that we can share with the employee. You know, that just cover. So if the fear of moving is, well, what if I have X and I can't spend $30,000? You know, have we looked at allowing the coverage to cover that?
So we look at the supplemental plans a lot. There's a lot of supplemental plans out there. The biggest thing that I've seen change with supplemental plans where it gets hard to kind of do that is it used to be 10 years ago, even 7, 8 years ago, you had these plans that would just, if you had a deductible expense, they would offset it, right? And those plans have largely gone away, and now what you have is you have a cancer plan, you have a critical illness plan, you have all these things, and what happens that we kind of see when you try and provide that for the whole population is, let's say you provide a cancer plan. Well, then it doesn't cover heart attacks. So now you got to provide a separate plan that covers heart attacks. And how do you benefit, you know, the employees as a whole? You know, so those plans, you know, there's a lot of excess cost in a number of those plans, even though they're cheap. They don't pay a lot out at the end of the day. That's why there's 35 supplemental vendors and there's 5 major insurance carriers, because there's a lot of money in there, I think, that's spent that doesn't ever get paid out. So the problem is that we see is when you try and provide that for a whole population, you know, I go into the hospital and have a heart attack and I get $1,000 and Brad goes in with something else and he gets nothing. But you pay the premium on both of us. So, you know, you're paying this money out and you're not necessarily benefiting. You're giving everybody a policy, but it's almost a little bit unfair that, you know, I had an event that got paid and he has an event that doesn't. So that's kind of the issue we see with providing those as a whole for the employees. But we do, you know, PSTA makes those available, and the employees have the ability to buy some of those Aflac and other plans.
Well, and I was thinking about that as an incentive, again, for the high deductible health plan, to encourage people who may be saying, well, what if I do have a heart attack? That's why I'm not switching, because that's my concern.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm surprised that there are many people in that new base plan as there are. And so I'm trying to, along the lines of incentives, think of ways of getting past the objection of moving to the high deductible health plan. And it might be partly surveying the employees and
Or it
saying,
might take time.
Yeah.
As he said, there might be a natural.
there's a learning curve
migration.
too.
Yeah. I mean, my goal would, you saw the other slide showed 70 people got into the high deductible plan out of 600, maybe.
I think that's pretty good for a first.
Yeah, I mean.
I will say, I think it was
getting up
far
to
better than
above
we all
100 would
thought
be
the
a
first year would
success,
be.
I think, in this next year.
I want to move along because I want to get James up there, but Commissioner.
The only
go
other
ahead.
question I had is, can employees go back and forth between each of these plans?
So, once a year during open enrollment, they're allowed to make that election.
Okay.
So unless they have a qualifying event mid-year, then they potentially can
Any
choose.
so pre-existing condition can hurt them from switching plans?
No, so there's no pre-existing conditions on any of the
So
plans.
What do you mean qualifying?
So you got married,
Oh.
or kids born, you know, you have,
That's
you
a
have
life
some
event,
options.
that's-
Right.
Okay, I was-
Something in your life changes
Yeah.
that allows you didn't know that when you
Yeah.
signed up.
If you just don't like the plan 6 months in, you have to wait till the next open enrollment.
Got it,
So you're
okay.
stuck with it
I
for
got
the
you,
year.
but you can switch over during that period.
Yeah.
That's why we're doing the 21 educational things.
Yeah, I think that's great, yeah, that can also help, that they know they can go back and forth.
Okay, I'm going to cut this off because one other thing that we want to talk about today. But I think you guys have done a good job to try and get around this and keep the expenses reasonable, and I know you're going to continue to work on it and keep us so that we have good coverage for our employees and can continue to attract employees, but at the same time hold in the costs so that we're well within our guidelines as far as the federal and state programs for entities like ourselves. That's really the main thing. Any questions? Okay.
Move
Do I-
approval.
Okay, thanks. Do I have a second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, very good. Okay, before we move on to the reports.
Consent or action?
Yes.
Action. She said one or the other.
I want to take
Both.
a minute. I want to take a minute and ask James to come up. We've had 2 serious accidents here in the last few weeks, and my concern is for the health and safety of our employees, and also the issue that might come up with regard to what we talked about with Diane with repairing buses, because one of those was very serious.
Yes.
And also making sure there's no, litigation and so on with us. So-
Well, good morning, everyone. James Bradford, COO. So yeah, in the last few weeks, actually, we've had 2 fairly significant accidents. One in Treasure Island that I'm sure you all have heard about, and you heard about in the news. Operators is still out recovering, and the most I can say on that is status is unknown, and we're just praying for the family and for his full recovery on that. And then a second one last Friday off of Gandy and I forget the cross street near the Wawa there. Grand, that's correct. And same thing, operators out, status is unknown, was transported at the time. There's only a couple people on board, and unfortunately, the person that ran into us, and that's been made known in through the media and the news, that resulted in fatality, where we had a vehicle rear-end us.
Mm-hmm, right.
Rear-end us in the
Okay.
back of the bus. So, I'm sorry.
Well, there was some news reports yesterday, I saw yesterday, that the man was not a fatality.
Really?
Yeah.
That was in the paper.
Right, that's what was reported at the scene, but, nonetheless, we don't like to see these things. Unfortunately, they don't happen very often, and, our full crew goes to the scenes and makes sure that, we're attentive and we work with the local authorities and get them everything they need. So, in terms of the vehicles, they're fairly significant damage. We have both of them in quarantine right now, just waiting to kind of be cleared with Diane from Risk and the local authorities, and that's kind of all we can do right now going forward.
Okay. So we don't know whether we have to send those buses out and go through the process we were just talking about, or whether we can do that in-house, or what the turnaround time is, or anything like that.
The turnaround time, I mean, those buses are going to be out of commission for a while if they come back at all. So pretty significant damage on both of them, including some frame damage. So I don't, I'm just really not quite sure on those.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Definitely.
Yeah, question?
What,
Commissioner
James, just
Scott?
curious, what, do you know off the top of your head what model year buses those were that got hit?
June 27th was 2007,
Okay.
and then the one on Friday,
2006.
2007 and 2006.
Okay, so those are both diesels then?
Yes, yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. Oh, do you have a question?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, James. I just
Okay.
wanted to bring everybody up to date on that.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right,
thank you. Okay. So now we're into reports. Financial report, Debbie?
Thank you. This month, we're looking at the month of May, and for the month of May, it wasn't one of our best months. We had a $2.6 million deficit compared to a $2.4 million budget deficit. So we had a $251,000 variance. A couple key things. Passenger revenue fares were under about $218,000. When we budget, we take a look at what's happened in the previous year, and there was a $217,000 AMSCOT purchase last year during the month of May. We sell to AMSCOT, CVS, and they resell our bus passes. So we were significantly under for this month. When I look at June, because we already have the June revenue numbers, we're back on track. So that's good news. And then so that's basically reasons revenues were so far under budget was on the passenger fares. As I mentioned, June, we're within 1%, 1.5% of budget. On the expense side, we continue to see a couple key factors going on. DART expense is up 16.7% over budget, increased ridership. We are also looking at the TD late shift. Those expenses are up $39,633, and our trolley expenses are up over budget, which we've talked about all year. We budgeted an 18 net of fares, so it's always going to be over. We corrected that for 19 already. So those are the key things there. On a year-to-date basis, though, we are not only on target to budget, but we are $99,000 favorable. So we had anticipated this year bringing a little over $500,000 in the budget, into our reserves, and we're on target to exceed that. So that'll be good. Any questions on the financials?
I do have a question, Deb. That one-time CVS purchase, do we anticipate that'll happen again? Or how long does it last?
They seem to
It's a good question.
be periodic. And Shpresa Zenko, who I think you met last month, or maybe that was a planning, I'm not sure, but she's our revenue manager, and she tends to call and work her magic. I think she pleads and cries, and then we seem to see purchases come up after that. But they just do it periodically, so it's hard to predict.
So are those all are they like month passes?
They're pretty much the monthly passes.
So when they get used, do we have a way of tracking them so we know? So we just when we get that revenue,
Yeah.
we basically do that as a cash accounting. We don't accrue it. It's just
Right.
there it is. And
Right, because we have no way of knowing when it's actually being used,
Right.
which we cannot wait for our Flamingo fares to go into.
Right.
Yeah.
He thinks we can track everything.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else?
Yes.
Okay.
So we sell those at a discounted rate to
We
AMSCOT?
do,
Okay.
10%.
And so the Flamingo fares actually should be a bump in revenue with as people shift.
As
from
an
one-
apples to apple, when you're talking about that, yes, but we're gonna be doing some fare capping. So
Right.
with the fare capping, we know we'll be losing some revenue as we go forward, but it also helps people who are not in the TD bracket, but are still what I would call maybe the working poor, so it helps everybody to save money when you do that. It'll give them a break.
Do our retail partners like CVS and AMSCOT know that we're working on another
I would say yes,
path
we
so
do.
that they're not surprised when all of a sudden things drop off for them?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the game plan, the idea is to, on those big racks of
JPs.
cards that are in CVS's and stuff, to sell the Flamingo next to Applebee's, little cards, right?
That's correct.
So,
So they'll still make some money then?
yeah, I don't know how they, I think there's vendors that make those big racks of all those, I don't know how it works, but.
I'm sure they have to be making money off of it in some way. We're in the process
Yeah.
of the solicitation on that for the retail networks.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Sir?
On the next two reports, the ridership and contracts, you have at your place of the month of June, which wasn't too bad actually as far as our bus ridership goes. We still are if you look at the very bottom, you can see most of the ridership loss can be explained by the Jolly Trolley not servicing the Clearwater Marine Aquarium anymore. That's been all year, and then one fewer weekday. And then at the as we talked at the board meeting last month, we added a line here, kind of in shaded, total mobility programs to highlight the growing number of trips that we're providing through either our Direct Connect, which is our first mile, last mile partnership with cabs and Uber, to get people to and from the bus, which is growing fairly substantially. Our very successful TD late shift program with late at night Uber rides, and then the small number, the new Sandbox program, which is DART trips being provided by some other vendor, Lyft or taxi or Care Ride. So that you can see that number's on there and growing. The big issue there is that we're not getting credit for those rides from the feds yet, but that's one of our major legislative initiatives. And then the last thing I'll just mention is on the PSTA contracts, which is a quarterly report we provided to you. And I think this kind of speaks to the first half of the meeting when Henry and Al were talking about all those maintenance procurements, but we have 6 pages of contracts there, and it really shows the good work that our procurement department does all the time in vetting all these vendors and doing these procurements, renewing them. The vast majority of their work is with Henry and the maintenance department on all those different parts. But it just represents a lot of good professional work by them. But it also mentions that the Cigna contract is our number one. Isn't it our number one most expensive?
Well, Care Rides are most expensive, but.
Care Ride.
Multi-year. I don't know, multi-year, but yes, health insurance is expensive. Our fuel and DART contracts are the top ones.
On that, he had mentioned that, I think he was talking about with regards to clinics, creating clinics,
Yes.
that you needed a bigger population. So, I mean, again, if you combine that with heart, I'm not sure where you put the clinic.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but with that aside, is there other ways because of the size of the heart and the benefits might be cheaper, or again, I think those are.
We did look at
yeah.
that. We actually went out when we did the RFP last year.
Okay.
And included heart in there, and their experience ratings were so poor that it was horribly expensive and would have cost them more than what they had been paying by combining it. And of course, we looked at it to say how much would it be for heart, PSTA combined, and we're doing better than.
Yeah, we bid it out, and we said they asked us, because they were having their major deficit budget problems, if we could maybe look at combining health insurance. And we said, no problem, as long as you pay, not only for all your employees, you pay any increase that would come to PSTA, because your folks are not as healthy or something. And so it turned out that was the case, and I don't know how much, if they're really that much more unhealthy than we are, but there was an upcharge, so they just it was better for them to stay separate.
Okay.
But I do think having a clinic here will be helpful, even if it's part-time, from a couple standpoints of just, you sit there and say, oh, I'm sick, but I don't really feel like going anywhere. You can just walk, downstairs. Or, just for little things to go down there. We could maybe even use it for our 19A physicals. We could do it for a lot of different things.
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Schulman.
I think the telemedicine idea is fantastic, both from a cost perspective as well as the real concern is making sure also that employees are seeking health care, so it doesn't become a more expensive problem and a more personally detrimental problem for themselves. I did have a question though about Care Ride, which I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it out loud anyway. So we pay $36 million over the course of the contract for Care Ride. Who else pays for Care Ride?
The rider
Okay.
pays a fare, $4.
But is there any other agency or
$4.50.
whatnot that pays for Care Ride? No. It's a PSTA contracted service.
Right.
Okay. The
I
reason
mean,
why I'm
they may
asking-
have other contracts. I'm not. They may have other
Okay.
customers.
And that's what I wasn't sure of, is it whether they're really just serving us or serving others. But driving around and looking at Care Ride, I don't know as a citizen of Pinellas County that they are paid for by PSTA, and that's a service provided for by PSTA. And so when we talked about, I was thinking about our marketing plan, which we were talking about last month, and letting citizens know what PSTA does. If there's some way to, Care Ride in partnership with PSTA on the side of the car, or things that we can do to help them understand that we're the main driver, no pun intended, of that, would help with our overall
That's a good
communication
question.
effort.
If you could put a sticker on there, it says PSTA partner.
Yeah, I think that's actually even in our contract.
I had-
We're allowed to do
But
that.
I see those little cars driving around all the
Yeah,
time.
you would
but
think it was
doesn't
just
say
a
PSTA.
third party
Right.
doing whatever they do.
Yeah, right.
I
yeah.
believe from a rider aspect, I believe we may be their only client, but they also do things where they're transporting, the blood between,
Mhm.
this hospital to that hospital, or from this place to that place at the same time.
It would be interesting to see if we can talk to them or work into a new contract that they're sharing recognition with the fact that that's where the money's coming from, so taxpayers know
I
that,
like
oh,
that.
I'm also paying for that. That's a good thing versus thinking it's
I
something
like
separate.
that. We require that of our Jolly Trolleys,
Mhm.
so I think
Yeah.
if we don't, we should be requiring it here. I like that.
Just to piggyback off that a little bit, is there, did we get ambushed when we contracted with the government entities that give us funding for that service? We did not anticipate the fact that it's extremely popular because it's good service. Is there a way that we can either wrangle more money out of funding sources, or in some way, I don't want to say diminish, but make it less popular? So, is there a way to do that without hurting?
Well,
I-
the Americans with Disabilities Act,
Yeah.
federal,
Yeah.
does not allow you to ration trips.
Right, but we used to only do it in group settings where we had 2 or 3 people in the vehicle. Now we're doing it basically one person at a time.
Yeah,
And
well,
so that's a dramatic improvement in the quality of the service that we're providing. And of course, it's driving up our costs because it's very popular.
we have an incentive built into the contract to Care Ride to put more than one person in the vehicle. They actually get a bonus for that, but we're looking at that. It's apparently not enough of an incentive for them to seem to do it. So we're trying to figure out if it would be beneficial to us to up the incentive or do something different. And then, the other thing, the way we heard last night at the track committee of the DART members, increasing the bus service, improving the bus service and providing more frequent service is a good way to reduce DART costs, because they can ride DART, but maybe they also could ride PSTA, and if we could get them to ride the bus more, that would save us a lot of money.
We do have $100,000.
Moving people to the bus stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a huge deal.
I'm sorry.
Say we have $100,000 in next year's budget that's funded by FTA for what they call travel training. That's where you work with the individual to actually go with them, show them how to use the bus if they're uncertain as to how to maneuver, etc. So, a lot of entities actually, if you're on DART, but you can ride, I call it the big bus, but if you ride the bus, it's free, because it's actually
Yeah,
saving.
that's another idea. That, the benchmarking has a whole wing of it that's just for paratransit, and they compare. And some of the other transit systems make it so if you qualify for paratransit, it's free to ride the regular bus. even though technically you're not supposed to be able to ride the bus if
Right.
you're on. But that never happens, so they make it free. It's mixed results whether that works in the long haul. Lots of transit agencies say it doesn't work at all.
Really?
It doesn't reduce the number of paratransit, it just gets a lot of people ride the bus, but it's, for some reason, doesn't reduce the paratransit.
That's weird. You sure we have the right people going to the bus?
Okay, any other questions? Yeah, Commissioner
Final
Iverson.
question. I was peeking at the planning departments, and they talk about millage now on your meeting coming up. And I don't necessarily want to stay and talk with Commissioner Justice about the millage, but are we talking about this coming year's millage, which
Yeah.
we should be talking about in the finance group? Or is this some hope and dream of escalating the cap that we have with Tallahassee? I just want to make sure I knew
So,
what it was,
it's
and
a
why
good
it wasn't,
question.
and why it wasn't in this part of the meeting.
Good question.
Millage.
So, again, the finance committee's roles and responsibilities for the PSA board are for existing activities. That's why all these contracts and stuff come before the finance committee, and the planning committee looks at anything in the future. So the budget for next year is a future, is a plan, is a financial plan for next year.
And our contracts aren't for next year.
Right, I mean, that,
All
like
these
that.
contracts that we just did are for next year, so it's all for next year.
Well, no, those start August 1st, I think. They're right now. I mean, Henry's gonna go and use those vendors right now. They're not tied to a plan in the future. I mean, they are in the future, but the budget's always been handled by the planning committee. I mean, we could change that, but.
Well, I mean, I just think, that's kind of a critical piece of the financial picture. So if you're gonna have discussions about lowering the millage, maybe I will stay.
We're keeping it the same.
And the action item on the planning committee is
But I don't
just to
think we are.
recommend the notice to advertise and the trim notice, which is due by
All right,
July.
enough of that. I was just having a little fun.
All right,
We got
all
too
right.
serious.
We could get a little
You're having a day.
joviality here at the end, right?
Well, I didn't know what the
Yeah.
conversation was gonna be
Okay.
about.
Stick
All
around.
right, I'm gonna shut this off, so we in 1 minute have to start another meeting.
I really watched the fries.
This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Very good questions, good discussion. Thank you.
I remember we got like the initial projections, but years ago, when are we gonna discuss that? And it was, oh, that's the planning committee. that does that. I'm like, well, then I need to
Yeah,
be on the
that's-
planning committee.
yeah, well, I'm-
Because
and I've been on-
those are the things that like.
Yeah, well, I've
they
been on
affect
the
current
finance
year
for a
budget.
while, and I still was surprised when I saw that millage on the planning and not here, and I'm thinking, well,
Do
maybe
you know
they're
whose fault that
talking
is?
about.
Stop looking ahead at the planning stuff.
Yeah.